For as big and successful of a franchise that Transformers is, you would kinda expect there to be more quality content attached to it. Don't get me wrong, I have no problem with the G1 era, the era that was arguably the most true to the ethos and concept of Transformers as a whole. Transformers Prime was good, the new Netflix shows was decent, and I found Bumblebee to be genuinely enjoyable. But for as much positive media that we've gotten out of this franchise, there has been a lot of negative, namely the Bayverse Transformer films. I mean, the first one was dumb fun, but after that, this series just seemed to crash and burn so hard, like the epitome of everything wrong with big Hollywood blockbuster action movies. Weak stories, obnoxious characters and dialogue, bloated CGI action set pieces, ridiculously breakneck editing, overstuffed plots, blatant product placement, cringy and crude humor. I could go on and on about everything wrong with these movies, but does it really matter when they still made a ton of money and apparently still have a very active fan base? All of this is to say it has taken us way too long to get a Transformer movie in theaters that is not only good but also fully animated. In fact, I would argue a big part of why this movie works so well is because it's animated. The action, the character designs, the set pieces all feel so at home in animation, similar to Spider-Verse. Hollywood can adapt these IPs into live action movies all they want, but these stories and characters really work the best when they're not restricted by the limitations of the real world, or restricted by superfluous human characters. No, I'm not against having humans in Transformers media, it's just most of the time the characters are either irritating, uninteresting, one note, or all three. Darn it, hogging all the Transformers screen time reminds me of the Sonic the Hedgehog movie, which is pretty enjoyable, but Sonic still has to share way too much screen time with James Marsden. I feel like Bumblebee worked because not only was Charlie likable, but she also felt fleshed out enough to carry the story when Bee wasn't on screen. And Rise of the Beast human characters aren't great by any means, but still a step in the right direction in having sympathetic motivations and connections. So now we have Transformers 1, a movie solely about the Transformers with no human characters. Such a simple decision that pays off big time. Now we no longer have to spend time on some goofy teen trying to score a date with some no personality hot chick. No, instead the focus is on Orion Pax and D16, brothers turned enemies arc. Basically the younger version of Optimus and Megatron, an origin story. Pax and D work in a mining facility to keep Cybertron afloat ever since Energon mysteriously stopped flowing, so they embark on an epic quest to the surface to find the MacGuffin, sorry I can't remember the name of it, return to Cybertron and restore peace and prosperity to the planet. So one thing I really appreciated about this movie is how surprisingly serious it takes itself. I know so many fans were whining in the comments when the first trailer dropped saying, it has too many jokes and it seems too childish. Oh no, the franchise that was made for kids is now appealing to kids, whatever will we do? Man, that seems so silly in retrospect. To be totally honest, the humor here is a bit hit or miss. It does have frequently funny moments, but there are times where the dialogue feels a little clunky and probably not as funny as the writers thought it was. The good thing is the humor never really gets in the way of the more serious elements, which does play heavily on the we can get away with doing really violent stuff because these are robots idea. The real life blood of the movie though is Optimus's and Meg's relationship, which feels incredibly genuine and even heartwarming at times, mostly thanks to Thor and Miles' dad's performances. And as much as the internet was once again ready to burn down everything because of the very vanilla celebrity voice casting, everybody does an acceptable if not good job. As just stated, Pax and D sound good, ScarJo pulls off a good Alita, and though Keegan-Michael Key is feeling incredibly overexposed right about now, especially with his voiceover roles, he does fine as Bumblebee, even though there were countless times during the movie where I was really like, just shut up. I'm really starting to see why Blitzwing ripped out his voice box. But back to the main characters, the movie does a good job of showing Pax and D's relationship evolve. Wait, more like devolve as the movie goes on. Surprisingly relatable, it's like realizing that as you grow as a person, you and your friends are heading down two very different paths, and sometimes growing up means leaving behind those that are holding you back. They're able to achieve this not only through Meg's actions slowly becoming darker, but also his eyes slowly become more and more red as the movie goes on. Similar to Spot in Across the Spider-Verse, where the white represents the humanity in him, and by the time he's completed his villain transformation, he's completely black. As far as the rest of the characters, Alita is definitely there. She does occasionally give off that aggressive girl boss energy, which tends to be the case when there's only one girl in a group of guys. Extremely tiny spoiler, but why would you feel the need to start off a pep talk with someone by saying, I'm better than you? Especially when that someone is stinking Optimus Prime. Besides that little nitpick, she's still likable, as is Bee. They're just very minor characters in the grand scheme of things. Speaking of minor...
I'm sorry, are those minors in the race?
Minors! Those are minors like us! They're minors in the race! Minors?
They had to have known this was gonna become a meme because ain't no way this scene was made unironically. So that was the good, let's talk about the great. The action sequences, easily one of the best action movie experiences I've ever had in a theater. To be fair, my seating probably had something to do with it. I made sure to sit smack dab in the middle of the theater. But even without the seats, this movie is like straight adrenaline shots to the veins. There's so much energy and intensity and dynamism, how do you say it, to the action that it's low-key hypnotic. It makes the action in all of the previous Transformer movies look underwhelming in comparison, and I think one of the biggest reasons it feels so thrilling is because of how the setting and landscape is utilized in these scenes. It feels so alive. Probably my only complaint is that because the action is so breakneck, it can feel a bit overstimulating and chaotic at times. I can only liken my experience to this movie like a roller coaster. If any of you guys end up seeing it in 4DX, let me know what that experience is like. As far as the bad, nothing really terrible, just minor flaws. By the way, I'm trying to keep this review as non-spoilery as possible because at the time of me making this review, it isn't officially out yet. Anyways, there's what feels like a plotline setup with the quintessence that doesn't really go anywhere. It's just there to confirm a guy that you probably already suspected was a traitor is a traitor. I mean, it serves its purpose, it just feels a little weird to bring up these interesting alien characters only for them to not really play that big of a role in the movie. The villain, who I won't reveal because I guess it would be a spoiler. I mean, not really though, he's canonically known to be bad throughout Transformers history, but I didn't find him to be all that intimidating. I just also had this thing where I don't tend to find jokey, passive-aggressive villains to be engaging. Okay, once again, the Spot is the exception, but he also becomes straight up horrifying halfway through the movie, so yeah, you actually believe he poses a legit threat. Not saying the villain here doesn't pose a threat, but I don't know, I just didn't rock with him too much. So yeah, this movie turned out to be a very fun time. Good animation, good character development, solid story, and spectacular world building, music, and of course action. I'd even be interested in seeing a sequel to this because Toy Story 4 director Josh Cooley really seems to understand what makes Transformers so appealing. It's not always the shiny cars and sci-fi robot battles that fans appreciate the most, but the engaging stories behind these characters. Speaking of robots, the Wild Robot will be here next week. The fact this movie and Transformers was originally going to have to compete on the same weekend but they changed the release date is actually really funny to me. The animated robot movies were going to have to duke it out. That being said, who else is hyped for this movie?